Hey guys, well I didn't set out to come back to YouTube with you know, a video a week this week, but that's the way it's starting to shape up here. So today I'm going to be working on the stereo because I want to, you know, put the dash back together there. It's apart, and actually the truck is non-functional with that way, or at least I couldn't drive it because the lights won't work and all that. But before I get into that, I figured I would show you something here. Right here, underneath the brake booster with no flashlight, hang on. Okay, so what I wanted to show you was what you can see under here, maybe, is you can see that orange wire underneath the brake booster, and you can probably see the blue wire next to it. Well, I watched a couple of videos on YouTube today, and of course, as Ron from Built It, Wrote It, Wrecked It was pointing out, Google is your friend. And I watched a couple of videos on installing a brake controller in a '99 Suburban, and both videos pretty much had the same content, and they pointed out that the wires for the to go back to the harness at the back of the vehicle are located under the brake booster, and those are the two right there. Now the orange one is your 12 volt to the 12 volt constant to the connector at the back, and the blue one is your electronic brakes, and that also go to the back. So what you have to do is you connect the orange up to the terminal block here, and you have to route the blue wire into the cab. So actually, you can't see it, but under here there's two terminals for auxiliary power. You got to route there. And you got to bring one of those inside to power the brake controller to get that, powers the electric brakes at the back as well. So anyways, so that mystery is solved. I don't need that connector wherever it is. It's lying around here somewhere. There it is right there. So I'll take that back to Napa. It only cost me 16 bucks, but hey, that'll buy something else. Anyways, so the project for today is not that. It's to get this stereo back together and get the dash back together. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead with this, and I'll show you what I do. Okay, so I should probably point out right off the bat, this is not my attempt at doing a how to install a stereo in your truck. This is just basically letting somebody know, what's out there in case, you've never done it before, whatever, that sort of a thing. What you can look for to help you install it quickly, and how to install it so that it'll still work, or that it'll work successfully. So basically what you need for tools, pretty straightforward. Soldering iron. Pencil soldering iron would work as well, but I like this one. A lot less likely to get burned with that one. It's got good heat. Solder, obviously. Heat shrink tubing. These might be a little bit too big, but I've got an assortment here as well. Now, just so you know, this is the dual wall heat shrinkable tubing. Not so necessary under a dash, but outside, very important. Okay, the reason why I say this stuff is important, the dual wall heat shrinkable tubing, is when you have a connection that's exposed to water regularly, what this stuff is it's apparently 2 layers of heat shrink. It doesn't look like it to me, but the more important part about it is it has a coating of basically hot glue on the inside, and when you shrink it, the hot glue doesn't shrink, and it basically fills the void inside of it with hot glue, and effectively seals it against the weather. It's really useful stuff. I used it all over the place on this thing when I was putting things together. There were some nasty splices in here that I had to fix, and obviously inside here, the tubing, there's a fair bit of that heat shrink, or a fair bit of wiring that's got heat shrink on it. Now inside the vehicle, not so important, but I use it all the time anyways. Other stuff that you're gonna need, obviously, wire strippers, side cutters, and most importantly, the appropriate connector for your vehicle. Now in this case it's my '91 Suburban. This company makes these kits, these connectors. I believe Metra is another one. Certainly I know Metra makes these dash kits, and this is just a mounting kit for your vehicle. Supposedly no hacking required to put it in. And not particularly expensive. I think this was like 16 bucks for this connector. It was a return, and I think that the antenna adapter is missing out of it, but I don't give a shit. I'll probably just use the XM thing. Depends how I go here. And this, I can't remember what that cost. I think it might have been 20 bucks. But nonetheless, it's definitely worth it. It'll speed things up for you. Okay, so here's the big advantage of one of these connector kits. Now, if you have one of these connector kits and you've got a harness from a radio that's been made fairly recently, you know, that one is, I don't know, 11 years old. You know, like that's not even that recent, but nevertheless, if you got something fairly recent, they color code all of the wires, and it's a pretty simple matter of just matching the color code. Like in this case, I'm holding a purple wire with a black stripe. If I look at on here, on the wiring, it has written on it in very small writing that you probably won't be able to see, that I believe this is the left rear negative. I can't see it on here. It says on here though. Yeah, oh, right rear negative. There you go. That's what the black wire says, if you can read that right there. Or the purple with the black stripe. And basically you just match those up and solder them together and you're good to go. Now I recommend soldering all of your connections. I find that when you twist wires together they will work apart, and then you're going to be pissed off because something isn't working. Your speaker drops out or the radio completely stops working. Now you do have to bear one thing in mind when you solder connections together, is that you are making a hard point in the wire. You don't want anywhere on either side of that wire to be flexing at all, because it will break at that point. You know, that's the disadvantage of solder. Now that is one good thing about, you know, using a nice big hunk of heat shrink on it, is you kind of stabilize it in that respect. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to strip all these wires here, and I'm going to put heat shrink on this end here, and I'll show you the alignment splice for anybody who hasn't seen it before. Okay, so what I've done is I'm starting just with the ground wire here, because it was the, well, it's the most important one in my opinion, but nevertheless. So basically what I've done is I put a piece of heat shrink on here. Don't forget that, or you're going to be redoing your connection here. And you just basically do this. You cross the two wires over like that, and you wind that one over top of that wire. So that's the, I'm wrapping the wire from the radio to the connector, to the vehicle connector. I'm going to go back and I wrap this one here around there, and it's as simple as that. Makes a very solid connection. Some people will just go and kind of bend the two wires back, but then you've got almost like a pivot point, and the only point of contact for, you know, transferring your electricity there is in the middle. But here you've actually really made a good connection between the two wires. If you solder it at this point, it'll be doubly solid. You could probably leave this alone. It'll hang together pretty well, but I prefer to solder it. I'm not going to show you the soldering, but that's the basics of this whole setup here. I'm going to go through, do all the wires, and then we'll install the stereo. Well, I decided I'm going to show you just how I do a quick solder joint here on that one. I think it's somewhat instructional, and you guys might, you know, like find something interesting about it, or even something to critique about it. Nevertheless, take my soldering tip. I'm heating it now, and what I'm going to do is I'll apply some heat to the connection. It would be helpful if I had my helping hands from the house that could hold the wire, but as it is, I do this. Apply a little bit of solder to the tip, and that'll let it heat transfer into the copper quite nicely. And you don't apply the solder any more from that point forward to the tip. You apply it to the wire, and the wire acts like a wick and soaks the solder up and makes for a super connection. There you go, that one's done. I probably even gave it a little more than it needed. So all that's left to do now is to move my heat shrink up after the connection has cooled a bit, and heat shrink it on. I could probably just put it right over it right now. And then I'll heat shrink it, and we're good to go. I'll do this one, and I'll do the rest of them, and then I'll show you the end result, guys. Okay, so I've soldered all of the stereo speaker wires together. I've got the power, like the continuous power and the key on power connected together. But then you have to look at these ones and you say, what do I do with these ones? And you kind of have to just kind of fudge it with those ones. I'm just going to wrap them over top of this. Now notice I put my heat shrink over on this side. I'm going to have these two wires here come in from this side, and then I'll wrap them around that, and I'll solder the whole mess. and then bring the heat shrink over top of it. It's important that I make note of that, because if I put the heat shrink over here on this side of the connector, or this side of the splice, then I'd have to come from this direction to solder my wires on. Not that it makes any big difference, but just for me, that was the way that seemed logical to me. So there you go. The whole mess all done. If I would have thought about it, I probably would have trimmed this one to length, but I'm not too worried about it now. Like what I'd expect to see in anything, you've always seemed to have a few extra connections that you maybe don't make use of. Now this one is for the system remote control. I have no idea what that is for this thing, but it doesn't relate to anything that's going to be in the vehicle harness. And then we have these two extra wires on here that my radio doesn't need. One is the blue one is the power antenna, and the other one is the illumination. So this stereo doesn't dim at night with the vehicle lights when they come on. Unfortunate, but that's the way that one is. So what do you do with these ones? Well, obviously I don't want to leave it that way, because that's just tempting fate that these are going to short to something, because if this shorts, it's going to blow out your dash lights, which would really suck. And if this one shorts, well, if you've got something in your vehicle that's got a power, or if you actually do have the power antenna, you're going to pop the fuse and whatever is on that same fuse. So what I do in this case is I'll just cut the end off of these ones. No big shock there. That still, in my opinion, is dangerous, because you still have exposed wire there. So what I usually will do is I have to do this with one hand here, I'll fold the wire over and then cover it with a piece of heat shrink. And then I'll heat shrink it that way, and that keeps that end protected. Now, there's no reason why you couldn't just put a piece of heat shrink on here, have it midway down on the cut, and heat shrink it there, but this way I find more positive. There's no way that that's ever going to short that way. I just figured I'd show you a close-up of the wires, and you can see what I mean about the hot glue inside of there. You can see it's kind of squishing out the ends here. And I had a interesting problem with the illumination light. This wire, when it heated, it slid down because the hot glue acted like lubricant. So I put another piece on and it slid up. But it's covering up the end, so I'm not too worried about it. Anyways, let's put this thing in and try it out. And just one further note on the heat shrink. You'll notice I was using a heat gun instead of a lighter to do it. Now a lighter actually is a little bit faster than the heat gun, but I don't like it for one very specific reason. A lighter is burning butane, and there's always a little bit of carbon coming off of it, and I'm always wondering if that little bit of carbon is a conductor, if that little bit of carbon could cause, like some odd behavior. Probably not a real concern, but that's just why I use a heat gun all the time. Well guys, I didn't quite get as far done as I expected, but I've got the stereo in here. And as you can see, that is not the intended way that's supposed to go. I have to find a place to route that XM satellite radio thing. And I'll route the wires accordingly. I'll probably put it behind the dash. I think there might be some space behind the glove box, but I'll figure that out. In any case, let's turn this on, see if we get some smoke. I haven't actually turned the vehicle on. There was no smoke when I plugged it in, but we'll see how this goes here. And it's been such a long time since I've used this thing. There we go. Okay, didn't want it to play something, but something did play. Getting some hiss here. Well, I could, like I said, seemed to work there. I didn't want to play any music. As you saw, it did play some drum riff there, and getting certainly hiss. Okay, there you go. So it's playing in here. I don't know about the rears, but I'll check those out and I'll let you know, because hey, I don't want to get a copyright strike. Yeah, so it works. I played some music. Front speakers work perfect. The right rear works, fairly well. Seems a little bit quiet, but it works fairly well. And the left rear is sounding quite distorted. I suspect that the cone is damaged, but it sounds like the wiring is all intact. So we're good to go there. So anyways, guys, that's it for today. Tomorrow, well, I'll find a place for the XM radio, but more importantly, I can maybe finally start on wiring up the brake controller, and we'll see how that one goes. Shouldn't be too hard. Of course, that's famous last words. See you later, guys.